Well, here we are again, the end of another year, and it's me, I'm alive, I'm still here. Didn't really make a video this year, but hey, I'm gonna do this one, because I have to. It's contractually obligated to me and all of time, have to make a top 10 games video. Even if you don't listen to the podcast I do, where I talk about games all the time, and you just found this, and you're like, oh, that NBZ guy uses that Pokemon stuff, I want to hear what he had to say about the year in video games. Here you go, this is that for you. 2021, it happened, and now I'm going to tell you about all the video games I loved this year, because there are lots of very good ones. So, let's take a look. Number 10. Record of Lodoss War, Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth. Look, everyone knows I'm a Metroidvania junkie, and here I am guilty as charged. But let me tell you why Record of Lodoss War, Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth, try saying that 10 times fast, is one of the best games you didn't play this year. I have been a big fan of Team Ladybug since their previous release, Touhou Lunar Nights, another anime-inspired Metroidvania. Their games have tight controls and unique mechanics that set them apart in the genre, while also sticking more closely to the Castlevania influence, having equipment, leveling, and a larger focus on combat than exploration. Where Record of Lodoss War stands out is its elemental system, where you can switch between fire and wind powers, allowing you to walk through lava or float mid-air. There are some really clever fights where you're switching between these constantly to get an edge and absorb each element to replenish your magic. It just feels really good to play and has some of the best pixel art I've seen in a game all year. The double jump animation alone is stunningly good. If you love this genre as much as I do, don't let this game pass you by. Number 9. Forza Horizon 5. Well, this is a joke, right? NBZ putting a realistic driving game on his top 10 games of the year? No, surely not. And yet, here we are. Forza Horizon 5 just makes you feel good. Whether it's the bombastic opening that has you dropping in from the sky with a variety of vehicles across a variety of landscapes, speeding as fast as you can down the highway with your favourite S2 ranked car, or making sick jumps to hit an XP board on top of a plane, the moment-to-moment of playing Forza Horizon 5 is just a dream. Mexico is a setting rich with environments that are both visually and mechanically distinct. From deserts to jungles to city streets, every area changes the way you approach driving through them. If I'm honest, a lot of my experience with this game was ignoring the races entirely and just roaming around the open world, finding XP boards and fast travel locations. And there is just such a perfect density of objectives and things to do that it's hard to pull yourself away from it. Every evening for a couple of weeks, I would jump into this game, turn on a podcast, and switch off my brain. And if that isn't a ringing endorsement enough, I don't know what else is. Number 8. Unsighted. Unsighted is the game every Nintendo fan needs to play in 2021. Do you like Zelda? Do you like Metroid? Do you like intricately designed dungeons and satisfying, almost rhythmical combat? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then you need to play Unsighted. You see, there are a lot of games that try to be Zelda in the indie space these days, and yet almost all of them fail to deliver on one of my favourite aspects of the series, namely dungeon design. Unsighted has some of the best dungeons I've seen outside the Zelda series, and in many ways rivals many of the 2D Zeldas when it comes to puzzles, exploration, and bosses. The items you use are all familiar in certain ways, and yet the ways in which they can be used so flexibly throughout the world, as well as in subsequent areas, really makes the game sing. Combat elevates the game to another level, with a parry system that is satisfying to pull off, yet never feels unfair in its timing. This, alongside managing your stamina, is core to succeeding in fights, as parrying an enemy leaves them open to a critical hit, helping you easily take down regular enemies and putting heavy dents into bosses. I should also mention that Unsighted is set in a world of androids, where time is constantly ticking down, and taking too long means that some NPCs in the world lose their mind and go unsighted, turning into enemies that you're forced to take down. This is a really cool wrinkle that I'm sure some people will love, but for me added a time pressure that I didn't want to deal with, and so ended up turning it off. The fact that the game allows you to do this only adds to my admiration for an experience that I found so thoroughly well made. Number 7. The Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve. I'm one of those people. You know, the type of person who downloads a fan translation for a Japan-only Ace Attorney game that probably won't ever come to the West. So I was as shocked as anyone else when Capcom announced that after years and years of waiting, it was finally localizing Daigyakuten Saiban, aka the Great Ace Attorney, outside of Japan. What this meant for me, however, was that I could jump straight into the second game, having already played the fan translation of the first a couple of years ago. And boy, what a damn video game this is! I was actually a little disappointed with the first Great Ace Attorney, as it felt like it only really got started halfway through, and by that point the end was in sight without room for fully developing an interesting overarching narrative. It ended with threads still hanging and mysteries unresolved, and despite really loving the characters and world, it felt like the lack of resolution really hurt it. But that, my friend, is where the second game comes in, and not only redeems the first, but makes it better. You see, these games really should just be considered one massive Ace Attorney game with 10 cases as opposed to 5. The story continues through, and not only provides massive revelations, but pays off reveals set up in the very first case with true mastery. The second case of Game 2 is a particular highlight for me, being one of the best standalone cases in all of Ace Attorney. All I will say is soap and tea, and if you've played, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, but that has to be one of my favourite deductive moments in the whole franchise. Every case in this game is fantastic and leaves you reeling by the end. And holy shit, the soundtrack is incredible! I was already a massive fan of Tobias Gregson's theme, but there is a track in this game that surpasses it and might be my favourite song in any Ace Attorney game. If you've never played a game in this series before, this is a great jumping in point and a fantastic addition to the franchise in its own right. Number 6. The Forgotten City. There are often games that pop up in the zeitgeist where I don't necessarily have a personal interest in them, but the praise is just so effusive that it warrants me wanting to take a look anyway. The Forgotten City is a perfect example of that. A first-person narrative game based off an old Skyrim mod that revolves around a time looping mechanic? Not something I'd normally try of my own accord, but the buzz was too strong for me to ignore. And my god, am I glad I played this game. Set in a secret Roman city, you play a character from modern day who somehow gets sucked back in time and now has to uncover the mysteries of this place, alongside finding out why whenever somebody commits a sin, everyone in the city is turned to gold. It's a fantastic premise, and one that slowly reveals itself as you talk to the city inhabitants, learn about their lives, and try to create the perfect time loop where all the problems are solved and the final mystery is uncovered. Maybe the smartest thing the Forgotten City does is, despite being a time loop game, it never makes you repeat the same thing twice. There's a character called Galerius who's always there when you start a loop, and once you've completed a task, you can tell him to go deal with it straight away, thus alleviating any need for you to repeat stuff you've already done. Truly brilliant stuff. But for me, it was the narrative twists and turns that really had me on the edge of my seat, as more and more layers are peeled back. There is one reveal in particular that had me howling to myself, both with laughter for how astonishing it was, but also in amazement because of how perfectly it made sense given the context they'd already provided. It is truly incredible stuff, and a meditation on morality and the nature of humanity that will have me thinking about it for years to come. Number 5. Impostor Factory. I rarely get emotional when it comes to artistic media. Maybe it's the societal pressure on men to never cry, or maybe I just have a high threshold when it comes to emotional beats and stories, but no games push me over the edge, with the exception of everything made by Kan Gao. I adored To the Moon, and really loved Finding Paradise, and here he is back again with the third game in the saga with Impostor Factory. This game presents itself quite differently than its predecessors, opening with a character you've never heard of in a mansion where murders are being committed, and every time you wash your hands in the bathroom you go back in time. I guess this really is the year of time loops. That said, eventually the game gets into its core emotional story, and just like every other game in the series, it's filled with tragedy and sadness alongside that tiny spark of hope. The writing is equal parts funny and resonant, and once paired with an absolutely heart-wrenching soundtrack, you have a combination that brings me to tears every time. It is incredible how this game that is still made in RPG Maker after all these years, and whose core cast is only represented by pixel art sprites, is able to evoke such feeling from the player. Perhaps it's the limitation that allows you to fill in the blanks in your mind, but I'm still astonished at how consistently these games affect me. From the intriguing murder mystery at the start, to the character story in the middle, and the meta-narrative layer at the end, I was absolutely enthralled with Impostor Factory the whole way through. If you haven't played any of these games, I cannot recommend them highly enough. They take you on a journey of life, death and discovery and are filled with moments that are truly beautiful. Number 4. The Artful Escape. For someone who tends to find story secondary when it comes to game experiences, this year has certainly been unique for me. The Artful Escape is one of those singular games, a piece of art that is so whole in its vision and ideology that you cannot help but respect it on every front. I don't think I've ever played something quite like it, and it is that uniqueness that makes it stand out for me. As someone who has always been creative, I think that this game tells such a strong story about the value of having your own voice and dreams despite what society tells you have to be. It's about stepping out the shadow of someone else and making your own artistic mark on the world, one not defined by expectations of what you should be, but by a desire to be something different that is true to yourself. You slide through surrealist space vistas that are alien and otherworldly, while you shred big spacey operatic rock songs that blend so perfectly with the landscapes you traverse. There's not a lot to the Artful Escape from a mechanic standpoint. For the most part, you're holding down the analog stick to the right and jumping every now and again, while holding down a button to simply shred on your guitar. But that isn't a bad thing. The feeling of creating music is made so approachable and simple, and yet still feels so good to do. There are moments where you harmonize with other characters, perform on stage, and even improvise to backing music, and all of it is made to feel so seamless, to mirror the freedom and ease with which the main character of Francis Vendetti plays this type of music. This is also one of those rare games where the star-studded voice cast absolutely knocks it out of the park, with Carl Weathers and Lena Headey being particular standouts. Never have I played something that synthesizes art and music like this with such clarity and vision. It is a true artistic work and a seminal game for the medium. Number 3. It Takes Two. Sometimes video games just need to be fun. It's ironic that I've talked about a bunch of games with incredible narratives and things to say about life and the human condition, and yeah, I'm putting a game with maybe the worst story of the year above them on this list. Ironic perhaps, but I think that It Takes Two achieves something so remarkable that even with an absolutely garbage story, with some of the least likable characters out there, I can put it this high on my list. Maybe it's the Nintendo fan in me, but It Takes Two is an amazing example of how modern platformers should be made, filled with creativity, idea after idea, mechanic after mechanic, just thrown at the player in a way that is always delightful and fun, and most of all surprising. I think about the tree section where you go from using honey and matchsticks to blow shit up, to flying on a plane and shooting out the back of it, to having a 2D fighting game section on the top, and then gliding co-op style all in the course of about 15 minutes. I think about when the game turns into a top-down action RPG, to when we had a snowball fight, to when you turn into grass for a stealth section, and more and more and more. There are so many ideas in this game that frankly, if I were to play it a second time, I'd probably be surprised all over again with all the crazy stuff you get to do. But the thing that makes the game truly special is the fact that all this is designed for co-op play. The weekend where Bally and I played through this whole game together was an absolute joy, as we non-stop binged our way through the whole thing. It is one of those amazing experiences that only Hazelight is making, and long may they continue to create wild and wonderful games just like this one. Number 2. Eastward. If there is one game that I could get more people to play this year, it would undoubtedly be Eastward. It is hard to recapture the magic of a game like Earthbound, let alone come close to what that game achieved, and yet here we are in 2021, getting a game that not only stands toe-to-toe with the SNES classic, but in many ways surpasses it. I was absolutely enraptured by the world and characters that Eastward presents. John and Sam are the heart of this story that sees you journeying from an underground society to lush rural villages and dense, characterful towns. Despite being a mute main character, the game does such an incredible job of humanizing John, mainly through his relationship with Sam, who is an absolute bright spark among the darkness that accompanies much of the game and its themes. This is a story that, at its core, is about relationships and what we would do for those we care about, where every character you meet is a mirror to hold up to the main protagonist, providing a reflection of what their path could be. Eastward is a game strongly carried by its themes, as the narrative ferries you to weirder and wilder locations. Much like Earthbound, divining a straightforward plot from Eastward is next to impossible, but ultimately that isn't the point. Driving these themes home is a soundtrack that ranks amongst my favourites of all time, with somber melodies and upbeat jams peppering the diverse areas you explore. And my goodness, are those areas absolutely jaw-dropping. Eastward, without question, is the most impressive pixel art game I have ever seen. The detail in New Dam City is just astonishing. The amount of work and effort that must have gone into creating these worlds, characters, animations, and backgrounds must have been gargantuan. I'm still delighted every time I see John cooking at a stove or Sam splayed out on a bed. There is so much life injected into Eastward thanks to the flawless artwork on display. And what many may consider its weakest element, namely the combat, is something that I really enjoyed. Having dungeons and puzzles where you have to split up the two characters to come to solutions, alongside heart-racing and incredible-looking bosses, means that Eastward delivered for me mechanically as well. I've not even mentioned the delightful cooking minigame or the entire mini-RPG inside the game itself. Suffice it to say, this is one of the richest gaming experiences I've had all year, and will stick with me for many years to come. Number 1. Metroid Dread. 20 fucking years. I frankly can't quite believe it. The game that I've been asking for since I was 12. The game that I never thought would actually happen. A canonical sequel to one of my favourite games of all time. And they even kept the original name! Metroid Dread exists, and it is unquestionably my game of the year. Frankly, how could anything else compete? It's almost unfair in a way, and yet, this wasn't guaranteed to be a slam dunk. Mercury Steam did a fantastic job with Samus Returns, but I had my fair share of criticisms with that game. In that sense, it is not only a miracle that this game exists, but that it is this fucking good. I mean, come on. As soon as I started to move Samus around the environment, I knew that this game was going to be special. Never before has it felt this amazing to move a character around a game world. Samus is fast, fluid, and dynamic in her animations and actions. So much so that I ended up 100%ing the entire map, yes, every goddamn pixel, because I was just so obsessed with how fun movement felt. Ultimately, this game takes elements from every 2D Metroid and synthesizes them into something that surpasses them all. From the open-ended exploration of Super Metroid, to the action focus of Fusion, and the mechanical inspiration from Samus Returns, Dread is a melting pot of all the best parts of Metroid. Much like Samus herself, it's a DNA concoction that is greater than the sum of its parts. I loved every nail-biting and challenging boss fight that rewarded pattern recognition and twitch controls in such a satisfying way. I relished finding upgrades and performing Shine Spark puzzles. I enjoyed the cat and mouse chase that were the Emmys, a new addition that allowed the game to live up to its name. And shockingly, I absolutely loved the story. As light as the narrative is, it so cleanly ties up all the previous threads, while also showing us a Samus who has been through some shit, and she knows it. Some of the subtle animations that belay her character in this game are just amazing. From the phase shift to the storm missiles, every new addition to Samus's arsenal felt well considered and deliberate. At the end of the day, this is a game I can see myself returning to year after year to replay just for the pure mechanical joy it gives my brain. Metroid Dread is a video game tailor-made for me, and holy shit do I absolutely love it. It is without a shadow of a doubt my game of the year. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Those are my top 10 video games of the year 2021. It was an amazing year, frankly, like too many good games that I couldn't fit them all on a list. So I want to give some shout outs. Axiom Verge 2 is amazing. It's such a unique twist on what the first game was, and I haven't really seen anything like it in the Metroidvania space. So cool. Psychonauts 2 is just this wild, bombastic, creative mind burst of a platformer. I enjoyed Kena Bridge of Spirits a good amount. I thought it was really cool. Death's Door, mechanically super sound, amazing boss fights. Toem, it's a beautiful little adventure game where you take pictures before your eyes, is an incredible game that uses your webcam and you blink and the story continues. Dodgeball Academia is a fantastic sports RPG in the vein of something like Mario Golf but with dodgeball. and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was just one of the most polished things I've ever played. Alongside Final Fantasy VII Remake doing an integrate thing that was so much fun as well. So incredible stuff, and I had to give a shout out at the end to Lost Judgment. I really got into the Yakuza games this year, just one of my favourite series now, and I don't think the main story of Lost Judgment kind of nailed it at the end, so it didn't make it onto the list, but wanted to give it a big shout out as probably a good number 11. And there you go, those are all the video games that I loved this year. It's been a great year from that front. Not a great year of me making videos on this channel, and I'm not going to say the thing of like, well, maybe next year I'll do more, because who knows what the future holds, but I would like to. I've enjoyed putting this together, and hopefully I'll be back again soon to chat with you all about video games and stuff. Until then, thank you very much for watching and listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye, folks.